In the Pali, it is called the Dhammacakkappavattana-Sutta. A sutta in Pali, or SUTRA in Sanskrit, means a string. We have the medical term suture, when you're stitched up with sutures. That also means a string. And this is, you hang together like beads on a string. You hang together the points of your argument, the points of your teaching. You put them on this string. So all the Buddha's discourses are called suttas. Dhamma is the truth. Chakka, or chakra in Sanskrit, is a wheel. And pavattana, the turning of the wheel. He is going to turn the wheel of truth, spreading his teaching. So he's talking just to 5 people. Just 5 rather skeptical followers, or they were not even followers at that time. But from this grew the mighty growth of Buddhism in many parts of the East, and more recently has come to the West. So let's look at this sutta. Starts with the words, "Thus have I heard." And Venerable Ananda, his personal attendant, who had the perfect memory, he was given the job of reciting to the assembled group of highly learned, enlightened monks what the Buddha had said. And so all these suttas start with the same term. Thus have I heard. This is what I, Ananda, heard the Buddha say. The Blessed One was once living in the deer park at Isipatana, the resort of seers. It was a popular place for all sorts of religious people to go and expound their doctrines. There he addressed the group of 5 bhikkhus. Now the word bhikkhu normally means a Buddhist monk, but these people were not Buddhist monks. They weren't ordained monks yet. The literal meaning of a bhikkhu is someone who relies on others for his food, fed by the goodwill of the community. Bhikkhus, these 2 extremes ought not to be practiced by one who has gone forth from the household life. Devotion to the indulgence of sense pleasures, which is low, common, the way of ordinary people, unworthy and unprofitable. And there is devotion to self-mortification, which is painful, unworthy, and unprofitable. What gives him the right to say that? Exactly. For the first 29 years of his life, he had a life indulging in sense pleasures. He was living in a very sheltered environment, son of the local king. Every sense pleasure available at that time was available to him. And he found that to be unsatisfactory. He then renounced that life, and after seeing Alara Kalama and Udakarama-putta, he then practiced self-mortification. And based on that experience, he found it to be painful, unworthy, and unprofitable. Remember, the 5 men he's talking to are still practicing self-mortification. So he's telling them, you are wasting your time. Avoiding both these extremes, the Tathagata has realized the middle path. And this is one of the hallmarks of the Buddha's teachings, the middle path or the middle way, the avoidance of extremes. Extreme of indulgence in sense pleasures, extreme of self-mortification. And there are two other extremes which we still recognize today. The doctrine of annihilationism and the doctrine of eternalism. Some people will say, at death, we are annihilated. Nothing continues, nothing goes on at all. Other people say, at death, something survives and may enter an eternal state or condition. If you are somebody enjoying sense pleasures, the chances are you are also an annihilationist, because you say, eat, drink, be merry, tomorrow we die, and after that, the end. So really enjoy yourselves now. Make the absolute maximum you can from all the sense pleasures available to you. Indulge, indulge, indulge to excess. On the other hand, the self-mortification people keep themselves going with the belief that the greater they mortify the flesh now, the bigger will be the spiritual attainment in the next life. So if they were annihilationists, there's no point in doing self-mortification. So the Buddha has realized the middle path. It gives vision, it gives knowledge, and it leads to calm, to insight, to enlightenment, to nibbana. That is the final goal. You can, in fact, take the Buddha's teachings on three levels. The first level is to help us to live happier lives in this life, telling us what sort of things are good to do and what sort of things are bad to do, and what sort of things we should try to develop and what sort of things we should try to eradicate from our characters. The second level is that we can create for ourselves the causes which will lead to happiness in a later life. If you do lots of good works in this life, then you are helping to create the conditions for a happy rebirth. But the Buddha goes further than this. What he wants to do eventually is for us to attain the state of enlightenment. No more lives after this one. Finished completely. Eternal, lasting, perfect happiness. And he says that that can be attained by the middle path. And what is that middle path? It is simply the noble eightfold path, namely, right view, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. This is the middle path realized by the Tathagata, which gives vision, which gives knowledge, and which leads to calm, to insight, to enlightenment, to nibbana. So it is this noble eightfold path which is the path we can all tread to reach the state of Nibbana. Notice he says this is the middle path realized by the Tathagata, not invented. The truths that he's talking about have always existed, but people were not aware of them. He figured out the way to these truths. He didn't have a teacher. He figured it out for himself. But you can think of it like gravity. The force of gravity has always existed. It wasn't until Newton came along that he discovered this law. He didn't invent it, he discovered it. Same way the Buddha did not invent these truths, but he discovered them. So when he starts this, or before he starts telling this sermon, the Buddha says to these 5 men, I shall instruct and teach the Dhamma. If you act according to my instructions, you will before long realize, attaining in this life itself, by your own intuitive wisdom, that supreme consummation of the holy life, for the sake of which sons of noble families rightly leave the household for homelessness. This is a very important statement here. I shall instruct and teach the Dhamma. If you act according to my instructions. He's not saying, if you bow down and worship me, if you perform all sorts of practices, magical things. No. Follow my instructions. So this is the role of the Buddha. He's an instructor, a teacher. The Buddha is not a divine being to be worshipped, to be prayed to be asked for guidance or for help. He's telling us, I'm going to give you some instructions. Now, it's up to you to follow these instructions. He said, you yourselves must make the effort. Buddhas are only teachers. So he says, if you act according to my instructions, you will, before long, realize, attaining in this life itself, the attainment of Nibbana is possible in this life. For some people it might seem an impossibly lofty goal. But people at the time of the Buddha and in the subsequent centuries have attained enlightenment by following his instructions. And this is how we can test. Do these instructions work or not? Try it and see. Then you know. So, if you follow my instructions, you will before long realize, attaining in this life itself, by your own intuitive wisdom or your own direct knowledge. This is something you will know for yourself. Not something that's going to be given to you by some outside power or force. This is something that you can generate, this direct knowledge, this direct understanding. So you will realize that supreme consummation of the holy life, for the sake of which sons of noble families rightly leave the home for homelessness.